What is your film about?
It's basically it's a love story. It's a kind of fairy story, and it's told entirely without dialogue. It's about a character called Vainye, who's stuck on an island basically with a guy called Putu, and is in a repressive relationship in a way, and has the beginnings of a relationship with a man on another island. That makes it sound really prosaic, but it's quite hard to talk about a film without any dialogue that's a short film without giving the game away, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But I kind of always saw it as a kind of a dialogueless fairy tale.
Why no dialogue?
It was a bit of a challenge, basically. I think the germ of the idea came in 2009. Myself, I'd met the other members of the British side of the crew at a film course at Sheffield Hallam University, and one evening, wet, windy evening in Sheffield, one of our tutors, Virginia Heath, who's actually a New Zealand filmmaker who now lives in the UK, just set this task of write a film without dialogue. And just the initial germ of an idea came into my head, and then sort of settled down and faded away, and was reignited when I saw Film Raro. So it was the initial idea was a test for myself, because coming from a theatrical and radio background, I'd been quite dependent on dialogue, and so it was to see the visual possibilities of film, and whether I could do it as a writer, as a director. Whether I could tell a story without dialogue. I think that was the initial trigger, but it's also this type of story, the story that formed. It felt to me like it could only be told without dialogue, So those are the reasons, yes.
What was it like working in the Cook Islands?
The people were wonderful. The support that we had from people who were taking time off work, a real level of commitment, performers and production crew, meant that whilst it was tricky shooting on Oneroa in the lagoon at Muri Beach, it meant that we were kind of properly supported, and I say more than supported actually, because we were supporting each other. So it was a really positive experience, the filmmaking experience there, and I think quite gratifying seeing this kind of this film really work, because you can't just have a read through with actors and get a flavour of it. As you've got to see it once it's cut together in the editing space. So once we had, like, for instance, there was a key scene with Vainye and Tomato across the Straits, and we were showing it back in the communal space where all the other crews were also there, and just seeing people stop and getting the story just from what we'd shot. It was great.
And how was it received?
It had a really good response. I mean, all of the films had a really good response. I think there's a really positive atmosphere. A lot of people found it beautiful. They found it moving, which is great. Different people have had different interpretations, which I'm fine with, actually. I mean, I'm not too precious about that. It's got to be one way, and I guess you've also got to be aware of that in a story without dialogue, is that there is greater space for different interpretations.
And what can you tell me about the Raro Film Festival?
Well, the Raro Film Festival, it's a kind of festival. There's the Raro Challenge, which is an integral part of it, which is like in no other that I've really come across, in that you get international and local crews kind of mingling, telling stories, and going really from shooting to screening in a very short period of time, and screening it to people on the island. So it's very intense, but it's very intense, but it's also on Rarotonga, which is quite chilled out as well. So people's response to films is quite warm, and kind of, I think, quite appreciative. That it's not a jaded audience in any way. They kind of really were vibing off it, and I think so most of the crews as well.
How was it different working in Rarotonga compared to other projects you've worked on?
Well, it's not really like any project I've done before. On one level, because I'm working on a film without dialogue, and not just simple geography, because there's lots of places you can go to in the world. I think coming from a British context, there are obviously geographical factors in how we work. In Britain, you're not able to trust the weather, quite frankly. So the notion of creating a script that's primarily set outdoors is a risky enterprise in Britain. But then also, I think maybe attitudes towards the filming experience are slightly different in Britain. You'll get people who are incredibly enthusiastic and are willing to show it, but then you also have some people who might not kind of respond in such a kind of excited way, in the way that the Rarotongan crews that we worked with just really they had a level of commitment which kind of created a real professionalism in them, but also a professionalism that was allied to a kind of idealism and a real sense of enthusiasm, which those two things don't always go together, because if you're a professional for many years, you can sometimes get blasé about things. But yeah, so it was great seeing that mixture of dedication with a kind of almost, there were times where it was almost just joyous, really,
And of course your background is English, but you're also of a multicultural background, a Sikh, right?
Yeah.
And this film was made in the Cook Islands, so a multicultural film as well. How important is it for you to make multicultural films?
Well, it's interesting, because I think I was put in an interesting position, because I think not only was it a script without dialogue, but it was also not dealing with British Asian themes, which a lot of stuff I'd written had done that. So I was aware that I was sort of leaping into the unknown for myself as a writer. I was also conscious, as someone having written from a minority background, that it would be very easy for me to kind of sort of stomp all over the Cook Islands with my own perceptions. So I hope that I created a story that was kind of flexible enough to kind of allow for kind of different interpretations, but also kind of a kind of meaningful creative dialogue with Cook Island crews. On another level as well, the story's quite archetypal. It's got a kind of universal, and it's not told in verbal language, so it's got a kind of universal element to it as well. So it was a mix of things about the very specific and the universal. It was interesting.
Just one final question. Would you like to come back to the Pacific and work here?
I'd do it at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
I'd like to move my family here if I could.